Lesson 95.
Ich gebe.
Lisa, our example sentences from the last lesson involved someone giving a book to a man. And so we had those as practice sentences. And now here in this lesson, we're learning how to say I give in German. And I can't help but notice that this verb is probably related to our English word give.
Yes, it looks very similar.
So I'm sure that geben here, the verb for giving, is etymologically related to our English word give. Lisa, is this a stem-changing verb?
Yes, indeed.
Why don't you take us through the forms of this verb and explain the stems to us?
Okay. Let me just say, first of all, that the endings of each verb form that you see in that little chart might start to look quite familiar to you. Ich gebe, you had ich habe before, so the E at the end, for example, for the first person singular. You have seen that before, so the endings are not as surprising here. But the part of the verb that comes in front of the ending, that is called a stem. And here you see the first person singular has an I, ich gebe, whereas in the second person, the I changes to an I, and we have the form du gibst. So this is called a stem changing verb because the stem, the vowel in the stem changes. And this usually happens in the second and third person singular. So this is a pattern you can look out for. In the plural, we go back to the E, and everything is kind of back to normal.
So the stem is either GEB or GIB. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so for second person singular and third person singular, we have GIB. For the others, we have GEB.
Exactly.
This is not the only language I've seen with stem changing verbs. Also in Spanish, they have certain verbs called shoe verbs. Because if you have a chart like this one and you circle the ones with the different stem, it looks like a shoe or a boot. When it changes stems, you get the first person plural and second person plural with a different stem. Here in German, it's second person singular and third person singular.
More
So
like an upside down shoe.
Exactly. From language to language, it will vary, but the concept is the same, is that the stem is not the same for every form of the verb. Lisa, as long as we're here, why don't you take us through this example sentence? Now we can say the whole thing in German. Before we had to mix English and German together to make sort of a hybrid sentence, but now that we know the verb, ich gebe, we can say the whole thing in German, right?
Yes. So the whole sentence is ich gebe dem Mann das Buch.
Okay, so we have the pronoun ich and then the verb gebe. And then we have, as the next unit here, the indirect object, dem Mann. And then the last thing or unit in the sentence is the direct object. So notice that the indirect object comes first. That's the simple word order we're working with right now. Again, as you get more advanced, you'll figure out ways to flip this around. But for right now, put the indirect object first. What would happen if the indirect object were, say, feminine? What would they need to put as the definite article? It wouldn't be dame, would it?
No. Let's take die Frau. Die Frau is the normal form, in quotation marks, the nominative form.
Mm-hmm.
We know it doesn't change in accusative, but it does change in the dative. It actually gets the article der. So it would be der Frau. Ich gebe der Frau das Buch.
So when you're using the dative case, you have to make sure that you're using the correct form of the definite article, or an ein word like mine or dein. If this sentence said, I am giving my Mann a book, or the book, we'd have to say meinem Mann, right?
Right. So, for example, my husband a book would be ich gebe meinem Mann ein Buch.
And if it were feminine, if we wanted to say, I am giving my wife the book, then what would we do?
We would say, ich gebe meiner Frau das Buch.
Sounds like you had to make a minor change.
Yes.
Just for fun, Lisa, let's look at exercise 1. That involves a neuter indirect object. Kind in German is neuter.
Das Kind, that's right.
Okay, so wir geben, we give, and then we have the indirect object coming before the direct object. So dem Kind, that's the dative, singular, neuter, definite article. And then das Geld is the direct object. Here in this sentence, you can see two forms of the neuter definite article right next to each other. We have dem, which is neuter and dative, and then das, which is neuter and accusative.